Well, good morning. Welcome back to the broadcast, Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Friday, January 28th, 2022. And our top story today, the Securities and Exchange Commission focuses on tougher cybersecurity rules. And joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, Dave Banerjee is the Chief Executive Officer of R&D Resources, Inc. Dave, great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us again on the program this morning.
Thank you. Nice to be here, Jeff.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you. I always love our friends in compliance, and I love talking compliance with you. And Dave, it seems like Chairman Gensler and the SEC, they're incredibly busy these days.
I know. Hester Pierce is one of the commissioners of the SEC, and she termed her own commission the Sanctions and Enforcement Commission.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think there's a lot going on here, and I think a lot of interest in protecting investors, and we've talked about that with you over the course of the last year or so. Dave, let's talk about these new potential cyber security rules, and I think the SEC, I want to get your perspective, but I think they really want to toughen this up to prevent consumers from being hacked, having their data stolen, and really just getting good privacy here. What do you have to say about all this?
Well, I think the SEC has an existing rule on exchanges and fundamentally broker-dealers and that have whole customer funds and securities. But they're looking at expanding that beyond that to the rest of the broker-dealer and advisory committee. It seems appropriate since it's a pretty strong enough security arrangement, and with everything that's going on in the world, we can ill afford to have our capital markets being affected. The difficulty is who's going to pay for the implementation, and how severe is it going to become. A lot of the mid-size and smaller broker-dealers and advisors maintain most of the sensitive data with their custodians and clearing firms. So we're not sure if the rules will apply differently to fully disclosed and what we call non-covered firms. Those are firms that don't handle customer funds. Or it'll be across the board. The difficulty is any rules across the board would impact the smaller firms adversely. And the smaller firms are very important. They make up a large segment of our industry, and they are important because of who they serve. They're not fungible. They serve specific markets with specific products. So we'll see how it pans out. Typically, from the time a rule is recommended and they get public comment and implemented, we tend to wait about a year and a half to see how it's being enforced. And we learn from the enforcement being done across the industry to tweak, how to respond to it. So
yeah, really, and you bring up some really good points. And I want to just highlight, the losses here are in the billions of dollars for people losing money through hacking, people having their information stolen, and that number is only going to go up. But you make a really good point, I should say. Regulation, there's a cost. There's a cost to regulation, and someone's got to bear the cost. So if you're a large firm, a small firm, you've got to implement these changes. Oftentimes there's systemic changes, there's infrastructure changes,
correct,
and then who bears the brunt of these changes? Oftentimes, Dave, they're passed on to the consumer, or in this case, the investor.
Absolutely. The problem on regulation is there are two kinds of regulations that comes down. One is a principle-based regulation, which is based upon risk parameters and left solely to the implementing firm. And then there's rule-based regulation, which basically says, here's the 3 items that you have to do. And the regulations have gotten mired between such common use of languages like shall and will. They really don't mean anything. And the danger is that it ends up becoming an enforcement activity using hindsight and the extreme brunt of the regulation, not just the implementation of the regulation, but the impact of enforcement is borne by innocent people that, you know, complied to the best of their ability, but was found in hindsight to be lacking. And they're put out of business and their reputation marred for life. So it's,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
yeah.
Finish your thought.
There are two items I read today where I guess the Supreme Court is handling two administrative cases, one with the Federal Trade Commission and the other with the EPA, that would question the constitutional nature of enforcement. And that's been lacking for a significant amount of time. I'm so glad it's rising to the level of the Supreme Court, where administrative agencies such as the SEC and others had a free hand in terms of sanctions and enforcement. So Hester Pierce, the commissioner for the SEC, is not very far off in her description of these administrative places, you know, so.
Yeah, look, there's a lot going on. I understand the concern, but you have to balance the concern with the enforcement and the regulation. Dave, I want to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about how the SEC is turning its sights on private equity. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Are you over 50? Would you like to get up to 33% more income in retirement? Then call now for this free book, Annuity Do's and Don'ts for Baby Boomers. This free book reveals little-known secrets about annuity strategies that will help you make the right choices before buying an annuity. Call right now for your free book, and as a bonus, we'll also throw in a free annuity rate report, both absolutely free for calling Annuity General today.
Call 800-504-8194.
Welcome back. We're talking this morning to Dave Banerjee, Chief Executive Officer of R&D Resources, Inc. Dave, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, and I love our show today because we're talking about the SEC, and as we said at the top of the show, Chairman Gensler and the rest of the SEC very busy. Now they've turned their sights on private equity, and I guess I wanted to get your thoughts on this, Dave, because private equity now makes up almost 35% of the capital invested in public pension plans. So I guess I can understand why they've taken a notice finally.
The answer is yes and no. I mean, one of the reasons our economy is one of the most envied is basically because of our capital markets, the ability for disintermediation between an investor and an investee. the more regulations you put in its place, the more distance between the two that you create, and that creates issues. So we have, based upon the IPO markets, REITs, ETFs, and things of that nature, we've seen a schism between individual investors and institutional investors. It's become more of an institutional market. The private equity market, although it's, again, it's institutionalized, provided a measure of relief in terms of investors investing in smaller firms, accredited investors, however, but investing in smaller firms and gaining the benefits. And smaller firms have different characteristics. Some are more cash flow based, rental properties and things of that nature. And some are more based upon appreciation, commercial properties and other investments. So the private equity firms have developed a in-house expertise between people who not only take an active investment, but an active participation in the management of these companies. The SEC's focus on this is the lack of disclosures, because at the end of the food chain, the private equity companies are also owned by individual shareholders. So what the SEC is concerned about is the lack of disclosure and risk assessment that are appropriate to the private equity market. And that's going to be a tussle. Like you said, Chairman Gessler has filled his plate up to the brim. The difficulty is how many of those will he be able to, see through. Yeah. SEC has become very much of a political animal, and it's become very, very obvious. So for me, individually, I'm waiting for the midterm elections to see if there's a sea change after that in terms of the SEC's focus. So stay tuned. There may be some benefits, like you said. The problem is the benefits always comes with a certain amount of costs. And the question is who ends up bearing the cost and how extreme is the cost? Sometimes there's no cost benefit analysis. The General Accounting Office and the SEC is required to do a cost benefit analysis in terms of any new rules. But the recent rules that they've been coming out with, when you read the cost benefit analysis, it basically says, hey, I don't know what it is, and here's my best guess. And some of those guesses in terms of the cost are pretty extreme. So
yeah, and Dave, I mean, we've talked about the changing of the rules around the accredited investor. There's a real push there to allow more people to, they use the word democratize,
correct,
democratize private equity. We've even talked about it being included in 401k plans. I got to think, look, there's disclosure that happens with mutual funds. We have the voluminous prospectus that, by the way, no one reads. We've got the fund fact sheets. Maybe you do, Dave. But most, the general public don't read. Are we going to see disclosures for private equity? And how much of weight will that be given?
Very, very important point, and you hit the mark. So the approach used to be provide disclosures such that the investor is aware of the risks of investing. Difficulty, those disclosures have gotten so extreme and so enormous that they've ended up being mattress tags. When you buy a mattress and it says, don't tear this off for fire hazard, and the first thing you do is tear it off.
I tear it off.
Yeah, exactly. So these are mattress tag disclosures. Nobody reads them. If somebody's interested in investing, they're driven by the potential of the investment or other factors. And the risk disclosures have become so, what's the word I'm looking for? So common, so copied that they don't really pertain to the investment itself. And again, they're voluminous. Nobody reads them. So disclosure by itself, and I think the SEC has taken note of that. And so they're basically saying, including such new regulations as regulation best interest and things of that nature, where they've come up and says, disclosures aside, you have to actually discuss the conflicts based upon this particular investment. One good example, which is not really comparable, is when you make charitable donations. You're never sure how much of the charity is actually reaching the poor or the disadvantaged, and how much of it is being absorbed by heavily paid executives working for nonprofits. The fact that they're nonprofit means nothing, So there's items of that you never know in a private equity investment, is how much is actually reaching what we call concessions and actually investable amount that is actually being applied, as opposed to being absorbed by administrative costs.
Yeah, and by the way, Dave, the cost to produce a perspective on paper, that's pretty expensive too. The cost of printing, and I know, we're running out of time, but I know that there's some electronic disclosure rules that were recently passed, at least by the Department of Labor, and probably something we'll have to get to at another time. Dave Banerjee, always a pleasure chatting with you. I love getting your perspective. I think the audience does too. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thank you, Jeff.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to? Well, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information and news in lifestyle, wellness, tech, finance, so much more, and all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Hey, it's free. And want to search our archives or check out our latest content? We'll visit our website and, of course, our streaming partners like Amazon, Roku, Samsung, and over 100 more. We're back again tomorrow for BRN Weekly. We'll be taking a look back at some of our best segments for the week. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep home safe, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
But if you're tired of the same old
Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the first lifestyle and wellness network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.